Hello from gardening at Douentza here in Ireland, and we're slipping very definitely into autumn at the moment, which is a great time to think about gardening tasks that need to be done. Time to make those lists of things that occurred to you as you went through the summer, things to be divided, things to be changed. Now, I made a list myself, of course, and I thought I'd share with you some of the plans I have for Douentza this autumn. I guess the first thing I want to show you that needs to be done in the garden this autumn is up here. And as you can see, this is the side of the garden, the main side of the garden, and all along it has defined entrances, except when we come to this part here. And you can see that the grass just opens up here and we can enter into the garden. There's no arch, there's nothing like that, it's just straight in. And I don't like this. I want to kind of close off this, this section here, visually at least. So what to do, because there's a real problem with planting this close to the concrete. Well, there really isn't much soil, so you can't plant trees and you can't plant bushes, etc. It's really difficult to get things going. So what I want to do is, well, actually let me come in here and I'll show you. So this leads into this section of the garden here, okay, which we know from my garden tours. And then if I just swing around here, you can tell that this is the path we would have followed coming across from that part of the garden. Now I want the experience to be such that, well, I'll show you. Okay, so we're going to proceed now from there and walk towards me. So we've switched over now and I'm walking towards that point I was in just a moment ago through this kind of little pathway here, and in front we see the continuation of the garden. However, just on my right here we see an open area of grass that serves no purpose. So what I want to do is just continue this border here, around like that, and join it up with that border there. And I'll grow low growing things here. I'm thinking geraniums, because geraniums are great plants for scrambling over a large area. So I can plant them quite far back and they'll scramble over this area where it's difficult to get anything established with deep roots, and they'll just kind of soften it and take up the area. So this is a job that's going to happen very soon. I'm going to just remove the grass and plant straight in this small patch of ground. I'm not quite sure what I will plant here further out, but it'll be herbaceous in any case, because we already have this big mock orange tree here, and on the other side the Parrotia tree, which actually is producing lovely autumn colour here at the moment. But I digress. So now we're down at the long border where we've a bit of background noise going on because farmers are busy working in their fields. And as you know, this border was planted by me, or replanted by me, last autumn. But I do see over here something that quite desperately needs doing. And it's this arm of the long border here, the one that contains a lot of snowdrops in spring. And it also has large clumps of sedums that are about to come into flower. And the sedum, of course, is a wonderful sun-loving plant that is much loved by a variety of insects. But my clumps are really big, and can you see what's happening there? They've all collapsed outwards. And this tells me that these clumps desperately need dividing. Now, sedums do tend to flop from the inside out naturally, and that can be addressed through the Chelsea chop. And this is a procedure whereby you cut off the perhaps half of the stems around about May time, and it just sets the plant back a bit, makes it flower that bit later, but also helps it to make shorter stems so it holds itself upright for longer. But my plants, my sedums, have gone beyond that stage, so this autumn I'm going to have to dig them up. I'm going to have to divide them and discard, I'd say probably a good section in the middle, but I'm going to have lots of plants anyway, so I must have a look out and see if there's anywhere else that I can put these, because they really are plants that are worth having in a garden and quite trouble free. Look at that little fella, busy, busy, busy. A third thing that I plan on doing this autumn, if time allows, is to divide a number of shade-loving plants, desirable shade-loving plants, ones that I absolutely love and would like to have elsewhere in the garden, such as Kirengeshoma here, which is just coming into bloom, and this gorgeous, gorgeous Dryopteris fern, which is just beside it. And also this Rodgersia, which is looking absolutely fabulous. I absolutely adore and would like to have more of in the garden. And it's actually quite a large clump. You can see we've got green leaves down there and over here. And if we look in here at the base, I think there's quite a clump of it in there. So this could do with dividing and being put around the garden. So you may ask, what am I going to do with all these desirable shade-loving plants once I get them? And the answer is that they're actually not going to travel very far, because if we look in my borders here, for example this border here, in here we have a daylily, and if we go further along here, we have another daylily. And over at the back here we have a third daylily. Now all of these daylilies aren't getting enough light to flower properly. I mean, this one actually did flower, and some of them have flowered this year because it was exceptionally nice, but generally speaking they're not getting enough light, so they're struggling a lot. And this is something that happens in a garden as it ages. You start out by planting for the aspect that the plants have at that point in time. So when I planted these daylilies, they were in full sun. There's another one over there. And they did well for a while. But then as the garden matured and the trees and the bushes, they grew up, they cast more shade. And it's time to reassess where I have certain things planted, because they're just not getting what they require at all anymore. And finally, an area that I plan on working on this autumn is the one over here. Now I haven't exactly made up my mind 100% what I'm going to do here, because this area has certain problems and I have certain solutions and I will have certain plants that I want to do something with rather than just discard. But basically what this area is really, really difficult to grow anything on. It's very, very stony, and I really don't want to populate it with any more borders. This border here was originally created to have 2 seasons of interest, and I planted it with a couple of hundred white tulips, persica tulips, that flowered round about May, and I also planted it with a variety of asters so that they would look amazing in autumn. Now asters of course like moisture, and this is a very dry area. This was back in the day when I didn't know that much about plants, and the asters did very badly for a long period of time and I eventually got rid of them. The tulips are still there, or a lot of them are still there, but basically anything I've tried to grow in this border just doesn't do well, and I'm really sick of looking at it, and I'm sick of kind of, you know, fighting against the grain. Now this tree is a dwarf willow, and I am sick of this as well. I mean, look how tatty that looks. For years I used to haircut it at different lengths depending on the season or my mood or whatever, and it looked reasonable. But you know, I mean, gosh, look at that, look at those really tatty leaves. It never really looks well. So the tree is definitely going as well, which will leave me with a big blank circular border there, which I could of course grass over, but I would like to have something there. And given that the soil is stony and the aspect is open and in full sun, I'm thinking grasses. And over here we have another experiment that didn't quite work out as planned, and this is a bank, and I planted it with a variety of grasses, and the idea would be that the sun would backlight them and they would look amazing. Now the problem here is that we do have some very tall trees behind, which weren't as tall when I planted it up. And also the grasses get going quite late in the season, so for a lot of the time it just looks really tatty. So I want to get rid of these grasses, and I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm in two minds about it. For this bank here I want to continue the Persicaria, which I believe is a fabulous solution to a dry open bank, and I believe it's still sunny enough to let that plant do well. And what I may do then is remove these grasses and place them in the circle there. Now I'm not 100% sure if this is what I will do, because what I would really rather prefer than tall grasses is low growing Stipa tenuissima, which we've seen in various places in the garden. So this here is Stipa tenuissima, and it's one of my absolute favourite grasses. Really easy grass that looks good all summer and even in the winter as well, because it's evergreen, but it's gorgeous when the sun catches it. And it's low growing as well. I'm kneeling down here, so look at that. It comes, I guess, up to my top of my thighs. And I kind of want a mass planting of this in the circle, and to that end I bought seed. So I have a lot of Stipa tenuissima seed, and I've grown it from seed before. I know it's quite easy to do, but the lead time is about a year, so I would need about a year to have plants that were suitably big to plant out, and I'm not sure if I can actually wait that long for that horrible circle over there. So I'm in a bit of a conundrum as to what to do. I guess the easiest thing would be to root out the tree and move those tall grasses into the border for the time being, sow my Stipa tenuissima seed, and then in a year's time reassess the situation. However, and we're back to that bank again, the two grasses on this bank are a very tall Miscanthus, that one there, and Molinia transparent, which is this deciduous grass here. And another suggestion, or another idea I've had, would be to use this Miscanthus rather than in the circle here, in a different area of the garden. So you can see it's quite tall and it could make a good screen. So maybe I won't put it here, but I'll put it over a place I'm going to show you now. Right, so we've now moved to a completely different part of the garden, just to confuse you. I'm assuming you know my garden as well as I do. We can just zoom around here. But this is where the greenhouse is, and the area I'm talking about is directly behind the greenhouse. Now, I have a fence here which goes up every year, and the reason why the fence goes up is that it blocks the view of what's going up above. So up there is the ungardened section of the garden. It's the work area. We've got the composts, we've got, well, my husband used to grow vegetables, but he doesn't anymore. And anyway, you know, every garden needs a slightly relaxed area for the wildlife, and this one is mine. But I want to block it from view, and I use this screen. But what about if I used those tall Miscanthus here? Now, I don't have enough to fill all of this space, but perhaps they could be divided. and perhaps I could buy some more. And you know, what are the solutions? I don't want another herbaceous border here, because that will kind of draw focus to the area behind, and I certainly don't want a hedge. We have enough hedges, and I don't trim the hedges. I think I wouldn't have any energy left over for gardening if I did all the hedges. My husband does them, and you know, enough is enough. Everybody gets a bit old in the end, and it is not the time to be creating new hedges. So perhaps the grasses would be a good solution there. The tall one, the Miscanthus one that makes very bamboo-like canes. I'm not sure. And finally, we've run over here to this other section of the garden, and just to show you something else grass-wise that I've been thinking of. And it relates to this patch of grass here. Again, a very stony side of the garden, so it's difficult to grow anything. But what about a circle of the short Stipa tenuissima here? Monoculture, just that grass. I think it would look really good. Low growing, it would flutter in the breeze. It could be really nice there. Now, if I do that, we're talking about sowing the seeds next spring, growing them next summer, overwintering them probably in the greenhouse, and then planting them out the spring after that. But you have to do these things with seeds if you have a large garden. There's no way people can go out and buy the number of plants that would be needed. So you need to get good at sowing seeds and dividing and all that kind of thing. And then just in terms of how this area feeds onto the tarmac here, I am not happy with that. I'm not happy the way it's just open. And in the same way that I wasn't happy with the very first thing I suggested that I'm going to change. But we have again the problem of something up against the concrete, so it would be hard to establish anything. Maybe just kind of a whole load of geranium roseanne all along there would be nice, but I don't have a cheap way of getting a lot of geranium roseanne, so I will think about that for a bit more. But anyway, these are the things I am planning on doing this autumn in the garden. And also that last one was a bit waffly, but it was just sharing with you some of my thoughts on the practicalities and possibilities open to me at the moment with minor changes in the garden. And I hope you found it useful, just to kind of hear the pros and cons that need to be weighed up before you embark on any changes in the garden. And who knows, I imagine a lot of you are in the same position now and planning on a few things to do in the next month or so, especially if the weather holds. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you'll check back soon. And do you know what, if you have a strong preference about a video that you'd like me to make regarding one of these changes, then could you please jot it down below, and I'd be happy to consider making the video. Now obviously, like when you make a video about a task, it takes 3 times longer than if you just do the task. So I don't make any promises, but if there's a lot of people that particularly want to see, for example, me dividing sedums, then you know, we can do that, or me digging up the first area of grass and planting out the geraniums, etc., then we can do that. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you again. I think I said it already, but thanks for watching, and bye for now.